Hello, and welcome to the Tuning In podcast. I'm Dana Evans, your inner voice and emotional support coach. In this podcast, we explore the deep wisdom that lives in our bodies, emotions, and inner voice. Together, we'll shed the layers that no longer serve us, creating space to tap into the flow of life and experience true ease. So, are you ready to join me? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. Today, we are talking about something beautiful, something romantic, something that you look at and you just think, ooh, I want that. So I'm sitting here in my office. It is a cloudy, cold day. I have a candle lit, which is really nice. I have a cup of tea with me, a little mini tree with white lights, and there is Kenny G Christmas music playing out in the living room. I was just prepping for dinner, and now I get to sit down here and chat with you all. And it sounds good, right? It sounds kind of romantic. And you get a little vision, a picture of what's going on. And that's something that I've really been witnessing lately online. I find that when I am looking at other people's stuff, specifically for me, this happens on Instagram, they're capturing these beautiful moments, say a photo of someone in the bathtub or sitting with their singing bowls with candles lit around them, or decorating their Christmas tree, or curling up with a book and a cup of hot chocolate or a glass of red wine. Whatever it is, it's moments being captured, right? We get this. That is what photo and Instagram and social media is. But what has really, really gotten clear to me recently, what's really cemented in, is that the reason I watch those moments, the reason I like them, is that it taps on something within me that I'm desiring. But what happens is I keep chasing those moments, or I'll have a tendency to chase those moments in someone else's life and then not access them within my life. So today we're talking about romanticizing our own lives and creating not just moments that we capture for Instagram, but creating experiences that we get to live into. And the idea, I think, is that we get so caught up in our own lives that we're not looking into someone else's for something that we're missing. So I will start right here. I was working today. I was actually working from bed. And I was writing some emails for podcast episodes. Hello, getting stuff ready and just prepping because I'm doing a lot of work with the podcast right now since we are fully back online. And then I grabbed my phone and I kind of started flipping through. And I'm flipping through my phone, I'm looking and I'm seeing all this stuff. And I'm seeing these posts, I'm seeing people doing the things in the present moment. And those are the things that I'm wanting. My mind is seeing those and romanticizing them and thinking, if only I could do that. It's not conscious. I have to catch myself doing this. It's definitely not like I'm thinking that in the moment, but that is kind of the unconscious drive that's behind this. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, stop. I have to stop because it wasn't feeling good. And I talk about this a lot with clients and our inner voice. We'll talk about this a lot. When do I know when to stop being on social media? How do I know when to be on it? How do I know when it's enough? And inner voice will always say when it no longer feels good. So there's this tipping point where it goes from, oh, this is enjoyable. It's a little break. Oh, look, these things are cool, to, oh my gosh, I'm starting to compare. I'm starting to see lack. I'm starting to look for another dopamine hit. I feel like something's missing. I want more, but it doesn't feel good, right? You know what that moment is in your own body. And I caught that moment and I'm like, I got to put this down. So I put my phone in airplane mode. I plugged it in the bedroom and exited the room. And I still had that really uncomfortable feeling that something's missing. And I'm like, oh, there's no food I want. I'm like, do I want a piece of chocolate? No. Am I thirsty? Sure. I drank some water. I don't really have energy. It's like there's just this seeking energy, and I feel unsettled. And I know myself enough to know that when that's happening, what my body is needing and wanting is to pause. It needs to drop in somehow. And again, to bring that back to what I was talking about earlier, is that's what I personally am seeing when I'm watching other people's posts. I'm watching and yearning for moments of presence that I'm perceiving in the photo that they're posting. I don't know if that's true. It's just that's what I'm perceiving personally because that's what I'm wanting personally. So, standing here wondering, wanting, yearning, and the mind would want to just like, okay, let's just watch a show. But that's not right. It wasn't right in that moment. And instead, I'm like, okay, let's clean the kitchen because the kitchen was messy from earlier, from way earlier when I made breakfast. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start cleaning. So I start cleaning the kitchen. I still feel, ugh. I'm like, oh, I need to watch a show. I need to watch a show while I do this. I need to listen to a podcast. And still, like, nothing sounded good. You know that feeling where, like, you're wanting something and nothing sounds good? That is the biggest disconnect where it's like, I'm craving something, nothing sounds good. Nothing's going to squash that craving. Nothing's going to give me that hit that I'm seeking. So I'm not going to do that thing because it doesn't make sense. So finally, I was like, oh, music. I can play some music. I recently got a little HomePod, a mini one. It's a little Apple speaker device. And I got it specifically so I could listen to music out loud in my office and in the kitchen. I was like, perfect. So I plugged the thing in and I'm like, play Kenny G Christmas. That has been my favorite holiday album always. My brother always made fun of me because he's like, it's elevator jazz music. Good jazz is like Dave Brubeck or whatever. That's the only one I can think of. But there is something about Kenny G and his Christmas album that just brings me so much joy. And I haven't listened to Christmas music really this December. So I hit play and boom, things start to shift. I make the lighting great in my kitchen and I start cleaning and just kind of getting into a flow of cleaning, tidying. And then from that, like I hand wash a bunch of dishes, I get everything back to order. And then I decide to start prepping dinner. I have some delicious kale from a local farm. And I had ingredients to make a Caesar, which is John's absolute favorite salad. So I'm like, I'm going to make a kale Caesar. So I start grabbing the ingredients. I had anchovy. Actually, I had a tin of anchovies and raw egg. And I start putting that together and then cleaning the kale. And all of this is showing me like, oh, I just wanted to be immersed in my own life. Like these are the moments. A Tuesday afternoon, Christmas music playing, twinkling Christmas lights lit in the house. It smells delicious from cooking food. The kitchen is clean, ready for the next phase of cooking. John's humming along in his office, comes out and gives me a hug and says, I'm so glad you are feeling festive this year. Whew. And I just got really emotional just now retelling that because that's the lens of romanticizing your life. That is the lens of deep gratitude, the lens of presence. And I caught myself, but not as much as I just caught myself reliving it right now. But in the moment, I was like, oh, this is it. Then when I told it to you at the beginning of this episode, I didn't feel emotionally connected to it. And then when I just painted that picture for you now, it dropped me fully into my body, into my emotions, into the present, into gratitude of this is life. That is the moment that I would see captured on someone else's content that I would want for myself. But there's nothing inherently special about the moment. What's special is that it's a moment in life that you're immersed in, that I'm immersed in. I wrote a couple notes about this topic. because a question I have is I just did this immediately. I've had this topic written down for a while. I'm like, I want to talk about this, but I didn't know what it would look like. Well, I literally just lived it. And after living it, I'm like, oh, now I'm going to record the podcast. Because the question that I wrote down was, how can we do this in our own lives? I'm drawn to what's romanticized. How can I do it in my own life? What is the difference between living it versus seeing it? And I think that's just a really powerful question to ask yourself when you find yourself in a feeling of lack or something's missing, whether it's from watching someone else's content online or talking to a friend or hearing about someone else's life, whatever it is, a movie, a TV show, a news article, whatever causes this feeling of lack or something's missing in your life that might trigger that discomfort, that unsettled seeking feeling, that becomes the moment to say, oh, I'm seeing it elsewhere, but am I living it? And what could it look and feel like for me to live it? And for me, normally, like that type of question isn't going to be answered immediately in the moment, but it does get answered when I pause. And so another outlet, I chose the outlet of cleaning the kitchen, which caused me to think, oh, I could play Christmas music, which caused me to get in that energy. But another way to do this would be to go on a walk, right? Or I love to sit down with Mia when she's on the heat mat and I just pause and look through her eyes for a minute. Like I watch the birds in the windows. One of her favorite things, we call it bird TV. We pour birdseed right on our back patio, right next to the sliding door. And these little finches come up and eat and she just stares and she's kind of obsessed, but she loves that. So I'll like sit with her and just watch birds for a second or put on a meditation or do a little body padding, check in with my inner voice, literally just get on the floor and like roll around for a minute. Any of these things and a million other things can bring you to that moment of pause. Not so much that you like go do a workout, right? Because that kind of takes you into a whole different energy. But it's like the pause might cause you to do a workout, right? The pause might invite you to clean the kitchen. The pause might send you to go give your partner a hug or to play with your pet or to write a little message that comes through from your inner voice or an insight that just arrives, or to make a cup of tea, or to put your phone down, close your computer, and stare out at the sky. The pause is that moment that shifts the attention from outward to inward, from seeking to having. Oh my gosh, I just remembered this. So last night I was awoken in a sweat. I don't know why. I hadn't had any alcohol. Like I have been sleeping such amazing deep sleeps and not really waking up at all. But all of a sudden last night I woke up, I was sweating. It was 12:30 a.m. And this moment came to me of a past inner child thing that needed to be cleared. So I'm like, okay, great. Well, I'm awake, so I'm just going to do this. This happens a lot as you get more and more into this work. It gets easier in that like moments will show up in your sleep and you can kind of clear them when you're semi-conscious. I love doing that. So I'm there like witnessing this memory that came up and seeing my inner child and talking to her and seeing this reverberation of patterns that were created from something that she witnessed young. And letting her know that, like, hey, you can still show love without needing to carry and hold those old patterns that aren't yours. It was so beautiful. I cried. And then my inner voice came through and it showed me this present experience that I have that I've been really unraveling. I've talked about this in my emails in the vitamin D newsletter, but I've been unraveling this pattern of overspending or rather buying as a way to emotionally regulate or just wanting, right? It's this seeking energy. And then buying from that energy versus buying from calm clarity and like delight and joy and anchored knowingness there's a very different energy for me that I've really been leaning into buying from that space versus like, I want it, I buy it. I want it, I buy it. I wanted it. It feels like I need it, feels urgent, I buy it, right? That's not the energy that I want to purchase from anymore. So I was brought to this moment of that buying behavior. And what I heard from my inner voice in that moment was more doesn't mean you have more. Getting more doesn't mean you have more. And it was like, it like clocked me in the head. I felt that truth so deeply, and it's associated with a visual for me. Different from less is more, right? Which we hear all the time, like less is more, less can be more. But this was very specific for me, was more doesn't mean you have more, right? Like buying more things, doing more, making more money, it doesn't mean you have more, because there's a lot of people who end up in a situation where the more they make, the more they spend. And I was kind of headed on that path, which is why I've really been on this journey to reset my experience with spending this year. So, more things in the house can just mean more clutter. It doesn't mean I'm more satisfied with the things I have, right? More friends doesn't mean more depth, right? More friends can just mean more surface level conversations. It just kind of brought me to this whole idea of I often end up in the energy of wanting more and wanting and seeking and looking for that thing that's missing. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but that has definitely been my pattern that I'm super aware of now, but it's driven a lot of things in my life and it shows up everywhere. And so when I heard more isn't more, I was like, whoa, this really is a way I can shift how I'm operating. And I share that whole story because it's now I'm connecting that to this idea of romanticizing our lives, to being super present in the moment, to having the pause. When we're seeking, the pause is an opportunity for us to see, well, what do we already have? What is here? What can I deeply immerse myself in my present moment of my life that fills me? Oh my God, right? Not filling from the external, not filling my body, my energy, my eyes with other people's stuff on Instagram. That's an empty fill. That's more doesn't mean more. But pausing and filling myself with my own life, more of that is more. What is here? What am I experiencing? What does feel good? What can I lean into? What can I amplify? What is already mine? Where could someone look at my life and think, whoa, I want that, right? And I say it not from wanting people to want it, but that's the energy of romanticizing it, like seeing a clip from my moment in life and being like, that's romantic. That's worthy of shining the light on, of amplifying, of expanding and expanding into what is, right? That's dropping into the present moment. And holy guacamole, I think it's a life changer. This is newer to me, okay? So I'm really playing with this, but things I wrote down were presence, focus, and slower pace. So my word of 2024, I sometimes do this, I sometimes don't, but this year it felt really clear. My word is focus. And I feel that that word has a lot of mental connotations, a lot of preconceived notions of what it means. But for me, it means presence. It means slower pace, slowing down, and being with what is. Whether I'm on a call, right? Like just being on the call. I have a tendency to be on a call and checking my email or organizing this or writing ideas about this or ordering something online. Like there's so many things I do when I'm on a call. So recently I've been really embodying I'm just on the call. Presence. Or if I'm in conversation with John, being with him, putting my phone down, putting my book down. If I'm with Mia, trying not to multitask with her. If I'm watching a movie, watch the freaking movie. Don't be on your phone, right? It's like There is so much that we do that is unfocused. And again, I feel like when we're unfocused, I'm speaking for myself specifically, but I do see this in our society as a whole. It's like when we're unfocused, when we're doing 11 things at once, when we're checking in here and checking there and checking the email and checking the social media and replying to this and sending the text message and blah, 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 we're bopping around, we're distracted. And when we're distracted, we're usually moving really fast. And when we're moving fast and absorbing other people's stuff, where we aren't is in our own lives. And that's why it can be so tantalizing to get caught up in other people's lives and think it's better and wish you had aspects and start to see what's missing from your own life. There's a healthy balance, of course, of inspiration from others. I love that. But we got to be real freaking honest with ourselves and say how much of this is healthy inspiration and how much of this is draining me. And I would say for me, it's like 5%, maybe 10% healthy inspiration. And beyond that, it ends up draining. And so the antidote to that is focus, presence, and a slower pace. Moving slower, eating slower, breathing slower, right? Even this drives people crazy. Walking slower. I was on a walk this morning, and this is another thing, right? Like I tend to do my walks and I send my voice memo to Candace, my magical morning partner. I think that's a really good thing to do on my walk because I'm in a reflection space. I'm on my own and it can distract me as well, right? So there's a balance there. But today I was on my walk and I was so not present while I was talking to her that all of a sudden I looked around. I'm like, oh, goodness gracious, I went way further than I intended to go. So I finished my memo, closed my phone, put it away. And my walk home, I was like, I covered all of this ground and I didn't even notice. And the walk home truly felt a little more difficult because it felt slower. You know, it's fun to have the time pass quickly when you're doing something. And also, I love my walks. And so, what does it look like for me to slow down a little bit and be really aware of what I'm seeing around me during my walks, right? Always finding your own edge and what you're looking for, what you're needing. And I think part of the message here is the real thing is ultimately more fulfilling than the surface level, the fake thing, the thing that isn't yours, right? The difference between watching someone live their lives and living your own life. It can be really easy to watch and not live. If watching inspires you to live it, great. Like for me, working out, doing weights in particular, I like it when I do it, but I'm not particularly motivated to do it. But you know what motivates me? Watching people work out on Instagram. I love it. It doesn't make me feel bad about myself. It doesn't bring me into comparison. It's just, I really enjoy it. And it absolutely excites me and motivates me to go work out. And so it's pretty simple, especially if I'm not feeling motivated. I'm like, okay, I need to find someone working out on Instagram. I watch it and then it gets me to do it, right? Love that. If I only watched people work out and never worked out myself, I would probably not feel good about it, right? So again, we all have to find that balance within our own lives because everything that we romanticize in someone else's life has two sides, right? Like that picture I painted about my kitchen, I had so many freaking pots and pans to wash. I had 2 cast irons, which require a lot of extra maintenance, which I see people romanticizing cast iron pans all the time on Instagram. And I love my cast iron pans, but oh my gosh, they're always dirty. They're always needing extra tending, right? And then you have to oil them, and it's great. I love my cast iron, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. So I was like, that was extra work. So it's like there's always work involved in the romanticizing parts, but it's the being present that allows us to even get to the place that we could romanticize a normal aspect of our lives, right? If we're moving so fast and if we're always distracted, then it becomes really difficult to recognize the beauty of a moment. In fact, I was listening to episode 135. I listened back to that episode the first one back just today. And I heard myself talking about the first 2 weeks after we moved here. And I remember when I was in it, I was like pretty good. I was pretty much in the flow. And listening back to it, I was like, man, those were the good old days, right? So it's like we can look back at our own lives and feel that way too. And for me, this practice is really like I'm wanting to enjoy what is while it's here. If I could boil it down, it's that. I want to enjoy what is while it's here. And I might not always be able to see all of the beauty in any given moment. Of course not. And of course, things as they marinate and mature in our minds and in our bodies, when we look back, we can feel the juiciness of it more. But I have just found myself so much in that state where I'm disconnected from the present and not truly soaking up what is, and then seeing the same thing in someone else's life and wishing it were mine. And I'm like, oh, right, I don't have to wish it. I can just do it. I can do my face routines. I love doing my face routines. And I love taking my baths. I love using my red light therapy on my face. I love cozying up in my snuggly bed and reading. I love lying on the heat mat with Mia on my lap. I love cooking meals and I even like cleaning up because I love the result of the clean kitchen. I love watering my plants. I don't ever want to do it. But gosh, when I'm in the presence of watering my plants, I'm like, God, this is good. I love my walks, right? I love the birds that come to our house in the mornings and Mia just like sits there and watches them. I just love the hugs that I get from John. The feeling of folding that last piece of clothing and putting it away, and you have a clean house at the end of the day, right? All of these things are worth loving, and they're mundane parts of life, depending on how I choose to see it in any given day. So, what can you romanticize? What pieces of your life can you make a little more sparkly? This is the next layer to that. If you're sitting down to read a book, what happens if you light a candle? In the morning, we have these really lovely pinyon pine incense. And when I get up in the morning, I have such a ritual in the morning that's related to Mia. She likes a routine. And so I used to really kind of be like, oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do that. Oh, I got to unload the dishwasher. But now I realize I like the result of these things more than I don't like doing them or that I didn't like doing them. So I've kind of just embraced them, but I've kind of made it a nicer vibe. So I light the incense. I just put on like the under counter lights. Some mornings I've been putting on just a little quiet classical music because John's still asleep. And I find that when I light a candle, when I freaking put on some really gentle, lovely music, and when I get the lighting right, it really changes things. I cannot explain it. My whole body's like, oh, this is so good. And it goes from we don't like this to this is so good. And I don't know what it is. So play with scent, play with visuals, play with feelings, right? Like if you're just going to lounge in your sweatpants all day, which is pretty common for me, like put on your cozy socks, right? Put on a fresh pair of sweatpants and like feel I'm choosing this and I'm going to make it extra cozy. Sometimes I sit on the couch and I'm like kind of chilly, but I'm like, it's not worth it. Take the cozy blanket and wrap yourself up in it. Make the cup of tea, make the hot chocolate, make the cocktail, whatever it is with intention and adding these other layers of your five senses, right? Taste, smell, touch. All of those can enhance and amplify these little moments. So, if your life is feeling lackluster or you're just thinking like, it just isn't feeling sparkly, I wonder if we do these little things, if it helps. Like John's mom, they came and visited recently and she brought these little mini fake trees and they have lights built into them. And honestly, when she brought them, I was like, ugh, I don't want these. I don't like fake trees. I really don't. But guess what? They're kind of cute. I have one in my office. I'm looking at it right now. I love the twinkly lights. We have a couple out in the living room, and John has one in his office. And guess what? Now I turn the one on in my office in the morning and I open the blind so that anyone who walks by can see my cute little sparkly tree. And I turn it on in the evening. And so anyone who walks by can see the cute little sparkly tree. And I'm like, this actually makes a difference. It actually makes things feel a little more romantic, a little more special, a little more sparkly. So, I would love to hear how you're romanticizing your life. I would love to hear like which area, what one thing might feel really fun. Maybe it's like you take a bath and instead of just doing magnesium, you light candles or you put a couple drops of essential oils, or like you put dried rose petals or fresh rose petals in the bath. I don't know. That sounds really fun and special, right? Or you just buy yourself some really cozy socks and a new pair of really cozy sweatpants that are like, feel so special. Or you light a candle when you're sitting down to read your book, or just when you eat dinner, or when you watch a TV show. I don't know. I'm all for this stuff, especially in the winter. Anytime I can make something more cozy, I can romanticize it more and I can be more present. So, whatever that is for you, I'd love to hear. It's so exciting and so special. And I just know that each of us has these really perfectly special moments that are worth amplifying so that you can see yourself within that lens of my life is something. Whether it's the smallest little thing or something really truly big and beautiful. It is so amazing when we can stop and experience it for what it truly is. I'm so excited to have recorded this episode. I didn't really have any plans, but that's what came through. Thank you for listening as always, and I will see you next week on the Tuning In podcast. Thank you for joining me in another episode of the Tuning In podcast. If you loved this episode, please rate and review it or share it with a friend. If you want to go deeper into the realm of emotions and learn the language of your body, check out my audio course, Emotions Decoded, at alignful.com/audio. As always, you can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans. See you next week.